Ready to find your flow? AFSA's got you covered.
That's right. The hands-on training lab in Richardson, Texas is where you trade PowerPoints for pipe wrenches. Real tools, real systems, and real experience you can actually use.
And if you're ready to test your skills, check out the hands-on NFPA 25 workshops, where you'll inspect, test, and maintain live sprinkler systems and fire pumps. No simulations, no fluff, just pressure, flow, and know-how.
It's the perfect way to get under pressure without cracking under it.
So get fired up and register today at firesprinkler.org. Spots fill faster than a charged branch line.
AFSA, where you don't just learn the code, you live it. Welcome to the K-Factor podcast, where we turn up the heat on all things fire protection. Brought to you by the American Fire Sprinkler Association, this podcast sparks conversations about the latest technology, trends, and tools shaping the industry. Join the AFSA tech team as we fan the flames of innovation in fire safety.
Welcome to another episode of the Cape Factor podcast. Really exciting episode. I think we're pushing 30 episodes released, and we have our first time two-time guest, Bob Caputo. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Josh. Good to be here.
Another interesting thing about this podcast episode, it was by request of some of our some apprentices that have gone through the AFSA program, and their curiosity was towards the end of their program, they realized they love our industry, and they're like, what's next? So what's next for an apprentice?
Well, that's really a great question for them to be asking, because I suspect most of them are looking for career opportunities as opposed to just a daily repetitive job function. It excites me to really talk about what's next. With regard to the apprentice books first, there is a fifth book out there called The Leadership Ladder, and that book is available to all of them. I know that CAFSA in the California group, they use that as their fifth book to meet some additional required hours. That book talks a lot about foremanship and leadership issues that are the next level. I mean, these apprentices graduate out of the program. Some have already worked as the fitter on a job, if not even a temporary journeyman or a temporary foreman status. So becoming a foreman is probably the next logical step in the progression from apprentice to fitter to foreman.
What is a foreman?
So each project has to have somebody leading the way. And so the foreman is considered the lead man on the particular project. Most sprinkler projects, at least in my past experience, are two-man crews, sometimes three, sometimes more, depending upon the job size or type. Obviously, a hospital or healthcare facility might require more help than a warehouse, for example. But every project is going to have a foreman, a person who's predominantly in charge, who's taking the lead for things like paperwork and project planning, goals that have to be established and accomplished, reporting those out as well. What's interesting to me and most important to me is the fact that 30% of the direct job cost is associated with field labor. So when we look at all the factors that are involved in paying a company's overhead, insurance, vehicle costs, tools and equipment, and all of the things you pile in, when we look at a sprinkler project, it starts with an estimate, and then it goes to design. From design, it goes to fabrication, and from fabrication, it goes to field labor. Almost all of the things that lead up to field labor are going to be more predictable, right? You're not going to save 20% on material. It costs what it costs, and unless you're buying something in bulk, you're not going to see a massive savings there. Design labor takes what it takes, usually a number of hours per head or per pump or per standpipe, whatever those are. 30% of the cost is directly attributable to field labor, and it's the only segment of our work that we can truly have variance, pro or con. So I guess what I'm going to say is it doesn't matter if the estimate's off or the design is late or maybe even bad. Fabrication could be filled with mistakes, I suppose. But it doesn't matter to the field operations because we still have to install the job for the number of hours and dollars that were originally estimated, or it's going to be a bad job for the organization. So it falls on field labor management and leadership to try to squeeze as much out of the lemon as possible, if you will. And what I mean by that is, even if the job was properly estimated and everything else is perfect, we still want to do the best job we can for the least number of hours and the least number of dollars. And a lot of that falls to the project foreman in conjunction with perhaps a superintendent or a construction manager within the organization.
So when you said it would be a bad job for the organization, you're talking high cost.
Well, obviously, Fire Sprinkler Company is a for-profit organization. That's what a business exists for. And so I consider a bad job to be any job that has cost overruns in excess of the estimated cost to produce the job when it was sold.
So that's just kind of a big ask for a fitter or somebody coming through the apprenticeship, because ultimately the apprenticeship, of course, is based on they need to get their job done in a timely manner. However, it's more really gaining the essential skills to become a fitter and an installer. So how would you suggest to get it? And a lot of them are on the younger end of our apprenticeship. How would you suggest to get them in that more business mindset, thinking about numbers and concerned with that?
My experience, and I've only been in this industry 47 years, so in my experience, I worry a lot less about who's young and who's old. I worry actually less about experience sometimes than I do about attitudes and aptitudes. If I find a young person who's recently graduated from our apprenticeship program who has a positive attitude, an aptitude for learning, and a desire to find ways to make things better, to be better organized, to take stewardship of tools and equipment, who's a good communicator, both to their own team as well as to the construction team. You know, when you get on these job sites, nowadays there's a requirement to show up to a weekly foreman's meeting in the superintendent's job trailer, the general contractor's job trailer. So it's not just communicating to your own team, both on the job and back in the office, as much as it is coordinating with other trades, dealing with maybe even difficult people. So I look at people who can keep their cool, have a vision for what has to happen in the next 5 and 10 days. A foreman's job is to really lay things out, make sure they have the right tools, the right equipment. They're not going to hit the wall, for example, by realizing, oh my gosh, I don't have main number 2 or branch lines 46 through 49. I don't have the right tool to have my team and my crew put this material in place because I wasn't thinking ahead. I didn't lay things out. A good foreman is going to see the next 5 and 10 days needs and look at what they have and what to ensure that they have what they need, both in manpower, tools, equipment, lift equipment, all of those kinds and types of things that speak to coordination and forward thinking so that they don't have lost time or they don't hit that wall where they got to send people home for the rest of the day or the rest of the week because they don't have what's needed to finish the job.
How important, you mentioned already about communication and the kind of the people skills behind that and a balance with technical skills. How much we're relying on the foreman to be a technical expert when they're on the job site?
That's a great question. You want everyone on the job site to have as much knowledge as possible in terms of technical. They're probably not going to know as much as a layout technician, for example. But in my experience, the best layout technicians spend a year or two in the field understanding the work that we have to do. It's not as easy as pick up the pipe, stick it in the hole, and turn it to the right, although that seems to be what we do on a daily basis. But you know, the foreman has to motivate people, reprimand people, set the example. They really have to show the rest of their team that they're willing to do the work, but they have their team's interests at heart, both when it comes to, it all centers on communication. How do you motivate people? How do you get people to want to show up on time, do the work, see the pathway to better salaries, better benefits and opportunities, not only within the company, within the industry itself?
From your experience, what makes your good fetter ready to lead a crew?
Well, you mentioned communication, and I think communication is probably the first thing that I think of when I look for potential leaders. When you're the foreman on a project, you're kind of the first line of human resources. When there's a complaint about a paycheck or a problem with healthcare, whatever it happens to be, they're going to go to their foreman first. So that foreman ends up having to be a good communicator, a good listener, a good problem solver, and frankly, a patient person, because folks are going to expect you to be the company representative, especially the customer, the construction general contractor, superintendent. They don't know all the people in the office or the owner of the company. They see you wearing that shirt and you're the representative of that company. And so how you communicate, how you act, perhaps more importantly, how you react when problems occur. And I've never seen a project in my career where problems didn't occur. They occur. So how that foreman acts and reacts are probably equally as important. But they also have to document changes, document lost time. At the end of the day, cooperation, communication, and coordination have always been what I consider to be the 3 C's of success. Learning is an interesting thing because, when you're 25 years old, 23, 24 years old, and you're out there on that job site, you haven't garnered enough experience not to overreact to problems that occur. When you're cool and calm and deal with the issues in a logical sense and a practical sense, you gain the confidence of your team and of all the other trades on the job site. Don't get emotional. Take that leadership role seriously. And I think those are the characteristics of somebody who's destined to be not just a good foreman, but perhaps go further in the organization, superintendent, general manager, maybe even someday an owner.
It's hard not to make the comparison, but just from this discussion, foreman's almost like a quarterback in the sense of being able to see things in advance, organize what's going on, take what the design was. And I think the biggest tie or what kind of connected that for me is when you said as they mature in their position, they don't just react, right? They kind of think through things. And you always hear with sports, right, the game slows down for them. So you're looking more for a quarterback or almost a coach in a foreman spot.
I would absolutely agree with that, and especially with that analogy. But, more importantly, and I think you guys have heard me say this dozens and dozens of times, but good judgment is the result of experience. And experience is the result of bad judgment. So the reality is you do learn as you go. If you've seen these things before, what makes that quarterback efficient and effective? Because he's seen these things before. You very rarely see a rookie quarterback as cagey or as successful, as it does happen. But at the end of the day, I think there's more successful quarterbacks in the middle of their career than in the very first part of their career because they do learn from their mistakes. The interesting thing about quarterbacks, since you made that analogy, is in football, when you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. So there can be a completion, an interception, or an incomplete pass. 2 of those are bad. When we look at baseball, I think about Tony Gwynn being a San Diegan, and Tony Gwynn, is a 300 hitter. which means that 70% of the time he got to the plate, he failed. Only 30% of the time he succeeded, and that got him in the Hall of Fame. The question is, how does that relate to us? Because there are sports analogies that are relevant. And so when I look at a foreman on the project, we really can't afford 70% failure rate. We need the 70%, 80% pass rate. And how do you get to that? Well, you get to that quite simply by pre-planning and thinking ahead and not reacting to what happens to you, but making sure you're in control of the things that happen. And those all come from that, coordinated effort, that pre-planning effort, taking care of the paperwork that's necessary. And that's why the foreman's making $1.50, $2 more than the next guy on the crew, because he's being compensated for those things that create the coordination that bring projects to a successful completion. And frankly, in construction, in fire sprinkler installation, a successful completion means we finished the project for the hours that were intended. That means quality control, quality assurance, not having injuries on the job site, not failing to call off lift equipment and the company's paying for, an extra month's worth of lift equipment when nobody was even on the job site. Making sure things are getting locked up so that we're not losing power machines or ladders or drill motors or any of those kind of things. All of those details are important, and the question is who's paying attention. The successful foreman accomplishes predetermined goals through the efforts of other people.
So a lot of it has to do with experience as well, and it's kind of just a thought and question, I guess. In regards to that, if I was 2 years into apprenticeship, whatever the case might be, and I think we've all hit that point, especially in this career, where that first go around, once you get the taste of fire protection water, you're excited and you're ready to conquer the world. But you seem to need that experience. What steps could you take early into apprenticeship to put yourself in that right path? Because we've talked a lot about, like, as an employer, what we look for as a foreman. But if I was the apprenticeship, what are my starting steps and how do I start to?
Josh, that might be the most basic question you've ever asked me, because the best thing an apprentice could do is show up on time, be eager to learn, understand they're going to get some of the crap jobs. I mean, every foreman is going to make the apprentice go and run, do this, and go and run and do that.
The gopher. Absolutely. You got to do your time just like they did. But the reality for us is this is a really cool business. You get to see almost all kinds of facilities, right? You're doing a warehouse one day and you're in a grocery store another month and in a high-rise building after that. And so you just get exposed to a lot of really cool things. And the more experience that you get, the more vision you have for success. But it does come back to that attitude and aptitude thing. Someone is going to decide what projects you're going to and give you the best experience and the best exposure. And if you're the guy that has the best attitude, you're always on time, excuse me, and those kind of things that are just kind of common sense, it's going to open more doors for you. I don't know of a sprinkler company who isn't looking for people, let alone good people. The runway in this industry is wide open. You can come into this industry. I've often said, this industry has afforded more opportunities for more people to have better earnings and better opportunities for home ownership and putting your kids through college and a host of other things. I don't want to bring this down to the money issue. I'm a person who's not motivated by money, but I am motivated when there's a lack of it. And frankly, the harder you work, the luckier you get, the more money you make, and the more exciting it is to show up to do something that we frankly love to do, because we are saving lives and property, and it is important. A lot of people never stop to think how many lives you could be saving, or the name of those people that you've saved, or businesses that you've saved.
because of the systems that we install. And there's frankly more to that than just showing up and twisting some pipe with a pipe wrench.
And I think another thing to point out is observation. Observation of foremen or people that you've worked with in terms of leadership. And it's kind of a leadership step. I think a big thing for me, it was to take the good and the bad and adjust yourself to make yourself what you think is the best for that situation based on that.
Yeah, so that's the funny thing about life in general, but especially at the workplace. You learn positive things from some people and what not to do from others, right? And so I think those are important lessons on both sides of the equation. Being an apprentice is an exciting thing because you can measure your progress as you go through the lessons in the books and in the classroom experience, and you know you're progressing, and hopefully you're with a company that with each progression there comes a little more money. I think it's fair to say that apprenticeship in general has kind of taken its rightful place back in our society's expectations. For a lot of years, almost everybody in high school thought they had to be college bound or they were being left behind. Parents and teachers and counselors pushed everybody toward 4-year schools and 4-year degrees. What's interesting about that is in this country, fewer than 50% of 4-year degree program graduates are working in their field of their degree. In fact,
I think it's on the rise too.
Yeah, it's on the negative side. Right. So the fact that working in the trades has become so much more acceptable and popular. I mean, let's face it, after a 4-year apprenticeship program, you will be making as much or more money than a 4-year graduate. That 4-year graduate from any state college or university is going to end up with what, $60,000 to $80,000 or more dollars of student debt. You go through an apprenticeship program, you have no debt after 4 years. You're making more money than you could possibly imagine. It is the start of an awesome career that will carry you through in ways that you can't even imagine. For those folks who go through an apprenticeship program and enjoy working in the field, working in construction projects, there is a long-term opportunity for career advancement. But as I said earlier, it's not just that. You could go into design. You could become an inspector and tester of systems. You can go into the office. I mentioned design. I mean to say, a layout technician. But beyond that, if you're a horrible layout technician, you can become an estimator. And estimators sometimes become owners. You shouldn't laugh at that, but it's kind of true. If you're in a layout technician role and nothing fits, then they make you an estimator. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. The thing about
I'd probably be an estimator.
Well, I look back on my time on the drafting table, and I can tell you everything I ever drew fit like a glove, but only because most of the people who had to put my stuff in are probably long gone by now. Otherwise, I'd be a liar. Look, let's face it, there's so many opportunities in the fire protection industry. Where you start isn't relevant, but where you end up is really relevant. Apprenticeship is the ladder. It's the stepping stones. Any apprentice who came to me and wanted to talk about the future of their industry need not look any further than my career, because I started out as a helper in a shop when I got out of the Navy. And now I'm the president of the American Fire Sprinkler Association. Coolest job on the planet. Well, other than being a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh,
yeah.
Dallas Cowboys, I guess.
I don't know about that one.
What do you think's a common mistake for a new foreman to make? I guess the question comes up because confidence comes with repetition and mistakes. So what can a newer apprentice, if they're trying to step into that role, what can they expect to make a mistake in?
So I think when you become a foreman, you kind of have to leave your buddies behind a little bit. Now you're the boss, right? Now you're not one of the guys. Because you have to become a trainer and maybe a disciplinarian, establish goals for people and start telling people what to do and create expectations and holding their feet to the fire, you're going to go through this metamorphosis of nobody likes me anymore kind of a thing. And I think that's a kind of a tough part that some guys have to grow through. Ask me the question again.
I was too busy listening. No. So the question is,
I think that you asked about the most difficult things.
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the
make?
challenges or mistakes that young foremen make are overestimating what it's going to take to finish something.
Okay.
I think another mistake is
conservatively.
You want to be conservative. You don't want to be overzealous in estimating a cost to complete something or the hours to complete something because you put yourself in a box that way. But more importantly, I think there's a tendency when something goes bad to raise your voice, to lose your cool. And I think that's the worst thing you can do. If I had advice, I would tell people, stay calm, don't overreact. Bad stuff happens every single day, and it's going to happen whether you're happy or not. So don't get too overly emotional about small daily failures.
That's a unique and hard one for people. I feel like sitting in maybe you're in I's shoes where we've been through the emergency service and we've seen the worst of the worst. So most of the times, I had the pipe break at the house, right? And it was just a calm process, right? There was probably 40, 50 gallons per minute coming out of this pipe. I don't think that's naturally a thing for people. So how do you,
It's definitely a learned and experiential thing to stay calm under those circumstances. When you think about an emergency room, I think almost everybody's been to an emergency room at least once. And as you know, you and I come from that side of the world years ago. But when you go to the ER, you have an emergency, but they don't have an emergency. That's what they do for a living. So if everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency. If everything that happens, you make a bigger deal than it is, then what are you going to do when you actually have an emergency? Right. Somebody does get injured on the job site or a pipe does break and water's running all over the place. If you can remain calm when everyone else around you is panicking, then you have a real chance at being a successful leader. And that's just true. I mean, so I guess my best advice, what not to do when you become a new foreman, is don't overreact to anything. Everything will work itself out. There's nothing that can't be fixed.
Besides our leadership ladder document, you always have like tidbits of good resources. Are there any resources if someone's listening and wants to get into from apprentice into foreman, a book or something?
I am a huge believer in reading books on leadership.
Or listening to them.
Or listening to them. I'm a reader, you're a listener. But you create a mindset, right? That's a term you often hear. You build building blocks in your mind of examples of how to act. There are some great leadership books out there. Some are military, some are not. I have always recommended a book that has a funny title, but Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun. It's an easy read. It's not a very lengthy book, but I pretty much am always reading some book about leadership. I like to read novels. I like to watch old Westerns. But if you want to create a mindset for leadership and for developing thought processes that will carry you forward as a successful manager and a successful leader, and those two are not the same, then listen to or read books on that topic. There's a guy, Patrick Lencioni, has a number of books on leadership that I love the way he writes and the parables that he creates. I could probably recommend 6 or 7 other authors, but it doesn't take much. Walk into a bookstore and find books on leadership, and especially if you find an author that you particularly like their style of writing.
That's one that actually, when first started with working with Matt, one of the ones that he suggested was Leaders Eat Last, which is a really good book about leadership. And I think that's where the maturity comes into play and experience is you have to adjust your mindset when you're young and trying to prove yourself. It's you're fighting for yourself. And you have to be willing to take a step back and guide us, or more so other people, which is just kind of an interesting perspective to have.
If I'm being brutally honest with you and myself, I'm a 69-year-old guy who's been around this industry for a couple of months here. And truth of the matter is probably well into my 50s, I was focused on me. There was a big ego. I wanted to be in the front of the room. I wanted to be the speaker, the teacher, the person people look to for knowledge and for a steady hand. Probably somewhere in my young 60s, I got to the point where I realized that my real job and my real value add is creating opportunity for others around me, for making sure that others have the knowledge and the tools necessary for their success. Because there's a favorite saying that it's amazing. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. I am someone who tries to be incredibly transparent and somebody who doesn't need that limelight and who wants to see and celebrate other people's successes. And I wish I could have adopted those thoughts and actions earlier in my career, because I could have been a more effective leader, and that would have made me happier now as an older guy. I kind of miss, those years of strength and youth when I was either hanging pipe or had more abilities. But as you realize that it's more important to the team that team has success as a result of your efforts. I read once that success has 1,000 fathers. I take credit for all of my team's failures, and I shine the light on my team whenever there's successes. The truth is, I wish I would have been that way 20 years ago, but it does take seasoning and time, experience, and failures. Every team is going to fail at some point in time. That's how you learn lessons. That's where the lessons come from, is your failures. You learn a hell of a lot more by what you do wrong than what you do right. And I think that's something that young foremen have to embrace as well. It's like, it's okay to make mistakes, just don't keep making the same ones over and over again, right? So that seasoning comes in the form of embarrassment sometimes.
Yeah, not just salt and pepper.
Yeah.
Monster, Red Bull, dope and tape. Yeah.
I heard Matt Klaus once say that he makes more mistakes than anybody, but it's because he makes more decisions than anybody. And there's a lot of truth in that. You can't be afraid. There's a poster that used to hang in an office I worked in that said, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way." And it's true. Make a decision and own it. I think that's something foremen have to do. But there's a lot of right answers and not a lot of wrong answers.
Yeah, it's leadership. My path. I guess I always think with kids, there's no parenting book. I think that's the same with leadership. It's like you can read all these books. There's a lot of ways to get to the end result, but I don't think there's one cookie cutter way.
Problem with kids, though, Josh, is by the time you figure out if you did anything wrong or right, they're too far down the road for you to correct them.
This is going to be a very controversial statement, but I think that you can make the same statement for leadership.
There's no question.
Yeah.
If you have children, they look at you as the example of how they're supposed to act. So your daughter is going to watch how you treat her mom to learn the expectation of what she should expect in relationships when she grows up.
Right.
And the same is true of boys in the opposite. And so that's why I talked earlier about that foreman having to be the example of leadership, willing to work hard, to be on time. You can't be the leader if you're showing up late, if you're, dragging yourself in 15 minutes after the fact, or you're leaving early, or you're exemplifying bad behaviors. no one is going to follow you or respect you if you don't set that example, whether you're a parent or on the job leader. And I think that's absolutely a true statement on your part. There's no question those are parallel. I think the part you meant about controversy is we're not going to treat our employees like our children, and I get that. I get the analogy, though.
And that's like when I first say that, a lot of people are like, oh, so your employees are basically kids. No, it's that they all have different experience, different personalities. What makes them tick is different. And there's no 100% right way and path to go.
It's so funny you just said that, because I've often told new leaders that they need to get to know their people as people.
Right.
I'll use as an example just the use of language. You get on the job site and there's a lot of foul language, a lot of F-bombs being dropped. But if you don't know that the coworker you're speaking to that way spends Wednesday evenings at church and Sundays at church, and is very sensitive to what he or she might think is unacceptable communication, you're going to lose them, period, right out of the gate. If you don't know your people as people, what are their likes and dislikes? Do they have a family? Are they, do they have specific interests? You don't want to put yourself in a position to turn those people off just by the bad choice of words or bad choice of tone, things of that nature. It is really important, if in leadership, to get to know your people as people.
So as an apprentice, how can you identify which path, do you think? How can an apprentice identify which path they want to concentrate on and head towards? Because you mentioned that there's not just the foreman path, right? You can go further than that and go superintendent. We can go design, ITM, lifetime. There's a lot of fitters that have been doing it for a long time and are good at it.
And like it.
Love it.
I think once you get into, so you were making sports analogies earlier. You know, when you're a kid playing sports, you have to play a number of different sports to figure out which ones you really want to play. And then even then you have to kind of figure out what position within that sport makes you the happiest. I've coached a lot of soccer in my lifetime, especially youth sports. And it's funny, if you watch kids, they'll naturally gravitate toward being a defender or being a striker, an offensive player on the soccer field. It doesn't matter what their parents think they should be, but if you just stand back and let them play, you can see where their natural tendencies are. And I think the same applies to work. You know, you get out here on the field and you make a decision, okay, I love this industry, but I hate this job. I hate the smell of cutting oil or whatever that might be. And then you seek other opportunities, hopefully within this industry, because we need as many people as we can find. And I think what we're missing is, if you are a young apprentice and you're excited about what we do, tell your friends, be the marketer, drag your buddies into this. Our industry needs more people. You know, when you're in high school and you learn about HVAC or electricians or plumbers, nobody learns about fire sprinklers unless they have a parent or a neighbor or an uncle, somebody who they know who's already in fire and life safety. This industry has a lot to offer. It's not just fire sprinklers. There's fire alarms and other fire-related experiences. Think of all the young folks who go to a fire academy training class and don't find a job in the fire service. You know, we have a lot of opportunities for folks who can still be involved in fire and life safety. I just don't think we do a great job of communicating that. And I'm hopeful that that generation of people who are in those apprenticeship programs will communicate and broadcast that.
And don't be afraid. Advocate for it and show your passion. It's pretty obvious when somebody likes something that they do. What do you what do we do here at AFSA, or what do you think that are to help a young apprentice start to network and start to gain these tools and resources?
So our apprenticeship program is pretty awesome. It's been revised multiple times along the roadway, but it gives the basic skills, the basic tools, and the basic knowledge needed to be successful for anybody who's willing to step up and participate. The American Fire Sprinkler Association exists. Its total mission is to train and educate for this industry. Apprenticeship is really only one part of that. We have training programs for designers, beginning design school to become a layout technician. We have an intermediate design school for layout technicians. We have inspection, testing, and maintenance programs. We teach hydraulics. If one of our members came to us and said, we need a program for, fill in the blank, 2 months from now, we'd have that program ready to deliver. Personally, at a lot of our conventions, I've had the privilege to make presentations, especially in the arena of field labor management, which I'll be doing again this year at the AFSA convention coming up in October in Washington, D.C. I love talking about field labor management and helping foremen, superintendents, construction management folks learn from my mistakes. I became a field superintendent at a union signatory labor company when I was 24 years old. If you don't think I made a lot of mistakes and a few enemies along the way, I can assure you I've got stories to tell you. But I also was successful with the help of my foreman, who taught me better how to manage their jobs, because I was open to learning. They knew that and they embraced that. And so I really have enjoyed a great career, but I've enjoyed that career because of the efforts and the willingness of others to be patient with me and teach me in ways that I could not have asked, couldn't have begged for this kind of an education. I am a shining example of what this industry has to offer.
How can an apprentice position themselves for a long-term career versus just the next job, right? Because, you kind of look around, and especially when we get to our conventions and we have discussions, even everyone who sits in the podcasting chair, they haven't been doing it for 3 years. Right? Different roles, different responsibilities, but how can I position myself as a young apprentice?
There's a lot of people are going to hate me for this answer, but you made the analogies of a quarterback before. I'm going to tell you this. Every season, only one team wins a Super Bowl. So that means of the 32 NFL teams, only one had success. But that's really not the truth. The truth is, I would take the salary of the lowest paid guy in the NFL on the losingest team because I would have a hell of a lot of fun playing the game. Every year I watch the Little League World Series. And every year I love to watch the pros come and play in the game at the Little League World Series. Every one of them talks about remembering what the game is about and being a kid and staying and making it fun and never losing that passion for what they're doing. I think to be successful as an apprentice and then a fitter and then a foreman and whatever else you do in this industry, you have to have a passion and some fun. If you can't have fun, stay home. It has to be something you enjoy doing. In addition to that, you have to play for a team that you have respect for. And this is the part where I think a lot of people will be angry at me for this answer, but I think you've got to work on a team that respects you, appreciates you, provides decent benefits and opportunities. I owned a small company for some years. And when I say smaller, I mean, as an AFSA member at a lower tier level. The reality is sometimes the future lies in choosing a great team. And so I'm not suggesting anybody should leave an opportunity, but they have to decide where they belong. And I think that's part of it.
I think we're seeing a good push for education and training. I'm not saying that it hasn't been there, but the last year's been crazy. It seems like a lot of apprenticeship programs, a lot of things like that going on, and also investing in yourself, super important. And I'm not saying that companies aren't willing to, but some of those smaller companies may not be able to afford such opportunities, and you have to be willing to take that chance on your own.
I worked for a lot of smaller companies, and I never worried about the money, if that's what we're talking about. If I worked hard, they rewarded me.
Right.
I've never worked for a company that failed to reward good behaviors, and I don't think that's a problem with our members. I think our members understand the cost of turnover and the value of good people. I can't speak to every fire sprinkler company or fire protection company out there, but you know when you're playing for the right team and devoting, you're selling your time,
right? And
they're in exchange giving you training and education. What companies put in your head they can't take out, at least not without a pickaxe or something. But on a more serious note, gain as much education and training as you possibly can. Take advantage of every opportunity. I will tell you, when I was a young person in this industry, if somebody asked me to go plunge a toilet, I did it. In fact, nobody had to tell me to go do that.
Right.
If I saw a problem, I went to fix it. It didn't matter what it was. Nothing was beneath me. I wasn't angry if I got the jobs that were a little less than what I'd hoped to get. Those are the kind of things that will endear you to any organization, any boss, and ultimately, if you're not standing there going, well, that's not my job. If that's not your job, what is your job? You're getting paid by the hour. Go do whatever the hell you're asked to do. Do it with a positive attitude and show up. And that's like more than half the battle. And I can't give anybody better advice than that.
What advice would you give an apprentice who feels stuck?
Go have a conversation with your boss or even the owner of that company. Go in there and say, hey, I feel like I'm marking time. I want more challenge. I think I'm capable of the next level. What do I need to do to prove myself to you? Communicate that. Don't be afraid of that. As an employer, I would love for somebody to come to me and say, hey, I might have only been here 2 years, but I am ready for more. That would just make me smile big enough that you could probably eat a watermelon whole. I mean, I would just love for somebody to come to me and tell me I need more responsibility. I need more challenge. That's awesome.
The difficult conversations aren't that just because they're difficult or uncomfortable doesn't mean they're bad.
So we call it conflict resolution. When you have a conflict, go hit the nail on the head. Go talk to somebody. What's the worst thing that can happen? You're not going to be more unhappy the next day because you had the conversation. Transparency, open, honest, direct communication will always pay dividends, in my opinion.
So I think last time you were on, I asked you what type of sprinkler you would be if you were a sprinkler. So this time, what kind of fire sprinkler system would you be if you were a fire sprinkler system, and why?
Definitely a deluge system.
Okay.
Because if you're asking me what time it is, I tell you how to build a clock. All the nozzles flow at one time.
So let it rip.
Exactly.
Well, I think this very interesting discussion. Really appreciate our listeners for even bringing it up. But it sounds like this could go a few different ways and not just a single part. Whether we talk about design and how to get there, management itself. But is there any last things you'd like to say to our listeners before we put a ribbon on this thing?
Truth is, I would just like to thank every member of this organization for being a member of this organization. We are absolutely leading the way in training, education, and development in this industry, and this industry is awesome. I appreciate every single member. I invite every one of you to reach out to us. Tell us your story. Give us an article for the Sprinkler Age magazine. We'd love to hear your stories, success stories, and share those with other people. Look forward to seeing people live and in person at the conventions, obviously, and otherwise. I hope people will reach out when they have questions, concerns, or issues, and that we become the resource for their for their career development.
Yeah, a couple quick announcements too. We are looking to, and here in the future, looking to get on YouTube. So keep your eye out for that. Another thing is in the link, there will be, we have an email address for the podcast specifically. So it's going to be podcast@firesprinkler.org. We'll also drop that if you have any questions or any comments, any suggestions, or just want to reach out to us and tell us what AFSA has done for you or have any additional statements. Feel free to let us know and we'll interact. Appreciate it. This has been the K Factor Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share wherever you tune in to podcasts. Or head over to our website for more. Reach out to us anytime at technical@firesprinkler.org. Stay safe and always learn as we keep the fire protection conversation going.